All right, so Ram, let's start from the start. What went wrong? I know there's a lot of ways to go with this, but obviously the expectation was going to be a really close race. But at least the Democrats I talked to, Kamala Harris, they thought she would win narrowly. It was a relatively close race, though Trump wins all 7 swing states, 312 electoral votes. What happened? And take it in whatever direction. I'll have a few follow ups, but let's just when
I
you
have kind
look
of
at it, what's your broad take?
I have three kind of takes. First of all, it's not wrong to say look at other incumbents across the developed world, but 70% of the country thought the country was headed in the wrong direction. So that's structurally an anti-incumbent mood.
Yeah.
Now, that's one layer, and that's to me, while legitimate, doesn't explain everything. The second layer, layered below that, deeper, is she runs really behind the ticket. And if she had run better, you would have had probably the senator in Pennsylvania get reelected, the senator this Ohio. So now I actually think a little on that.
Yeah.
There's actually two campaigns. She gets tapped, and the Democrats are down 7-9, depending on which poll you want to use as a
Yes,
benchmark.
he's clearly losing and going down.
Right.
Yes.
And she, within all the way to the debate, goes +3. So that's basically, depending on what your benchmark is, either a 10 or 12-point swing.
Which is remarkable in a race that is so
Very,
as
very,
static
very.
as a presidential is.
And if you look at that, it's very focused on the economy, very focused on the middle class. And one of the best testing ads runs in that period of time on the economy, and her saying basically it was like, to the people whose paycheck doesn't get them to the 31st of the month, I hear you, I see you,
Yeah.
and I'm going to fight for you.
Yep.
Something, it's a bifurcated, something after the debate makes them run on the democracy in the closing weeks of the campaign.
After her debate with Trump, not the
Yeah,
Biden.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Right. After her debate, that's a very good catch.
Yep.
For your listeners, and it's almost like a schizophrenic election. And I don't understand why they decided to close. As I've said before, if you cared about the democracy, we had you on a low, but they walked away from something that was winning, and then she goes down 3. So you get this 10-point, 12-point swing towards her, and then you have this 3-point, basically equivalent of a 6-point drop when they get off of economics into this message that's about democracy and what's at
Yep.
stake in the sense of that. And I find, so to me, that's a second element. And then third, which is deeper than just this election, but this moment in time in history in which the election fits as a piece of this. And you've heard me before on this, Chris. Look, the Iraq War, we spent $1 trillion, lost thousands of kids' lives.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands are maimed, built on yellow cake from Niger on a lie.
Yep.
And nobody who advocated that war, who propagated that war, ever paid a career or professional advice. And thousands of kids lost their lives on a lie. 5 years later, liar loans, people lose their homes, and the bankers are demanding that they deserve a bonus.
Yep.
And again, no banker goes to jail. Now, this is well documented. I was one in the White House advocating this is not for me to clean up, but we needed Old Testament justice. The bankers needed to be brought. The bankers needed to be, and I wanted to do financial reform first over healthcare.
Yeah.
Because I thought the system, the country needed this catharsis that somebody upstairs, somebody walking around, needed to be held accountable.
Because if they had done it in their lives, they would have been held accountable.
Well, look,
right?
you have thousands of kids lose their lives, and thousands of people millions of people lose their livelihood. And nobody who propagated this lost anything. No legal, nothing. And they're sitting on boards, they're teaching at universities. So to me, and then you fast forward to COVID, and in a period of time in which people lost confidence, faith, and started to have hatred for the elite, we don the coat of the establishment walking around. Hey, the sign says shut up, sit over there. Your kids aren't going to school. Close this. Don't do that. Don't do it. You can't. And we became, and I say, like, There's college, non-college. There's black, white. There's male, female. There's urban, rural. There's urban, suburban. There's all these divisions. There's really the biggest one is establishment versus everybody else, which is why Donald Trump, when he says, "I am going to be the instrument of your rage,"
Yep.
captures, and I don't know, we parallel parked into just follow the science when, like, take schools, which you've heard me on before.
Yep.
It was pretty clear within the first 6 months that young kids were not having the same healthcare
Right.
consequences of either pre-existing conditions or old people, and
Right.
yet we kept kids locked out of school. So to me, the anti-establishment and us as coastal dominated party became the establishment. So all those things, yes, there was an anti-establishment. B, she lost her economic message and went to a Democratic Aspen Institute, Brookings Institute message in the last 6 weeks, closes on it. And then third, we in this post-COVID era, eat your peas became the establishment, and when people really wanted to do nothing else than but to take a bat and beat the crap out of the establishment.
Can I?
So
Okay.
that's
So I,
kind of that's it. I
yeah.
mean, there's other issues on. I listened to little Anzalone, what you guys would say, but I would
Yeah.
say is also the road out of here. I would say we are seen as weak and woke,
Yeah.
but they are also the other side are seen as corrupt and betrayal. That's why you had the consequences of Wisconsin yesterday, and
Yeah.
we can. So both parties have weaknesses, and
Yes.
I would
Right.
punch as a ticket out of here. One piece. It's not the whole thing. As a ticket out of here, I'd punch at this corruption and I would punch at this betrayal. Who told you to talk about the price of Greenland when I wanted price of groceries? Who
Yeah.
told you to do this with crypto when what I really wanted you to do was work on my children getting out of the basement and getting a home?
Yeah.
So to
Um.
me,
I want to go to that. I want to dig on a couple
this
quick
is your
things that you
this is
mentioned.
this is your Substack. It's your world. I just live in it.
Okay, so number one, she's running on the economy with a little bit of hope kind of mixed in there, optimism. And then she
I
changes.
think I think I think the word was joy.
Yes, joy, right. Sorry, hope was some other guy. I don't really remember that one.
There was two guys.
That's right.
Hope you
Bill
believe
and
in, and a
Barack.
kid. Yeah, both.
Hope works.
Yeah,
Um,
hope works.
So she changes the message. You said, she changes the democracy message. You said Aspen Institute, Brookings Institute. A lot of people will say, and you know what? I don't think I've talked to you about this. Let me ask you about this. A lot of people will say, look, what happened on January 6, 2021 was damn near an overturning of democracy. The Capitol was occupied. People were, dozens of police officers were injured. Why the hell is democracy? I talked to so many people who are like, how could the guy who was involved in January 6th get elected if we just say every day, this was the guy who fomented January 6th? So tell me, I talked to lots of consultants who said, hey, look, I think January 6th was terrible, but voters don't. Like, tell me why that, in your estimation, that message is a loser. I'm
Because
putting words in your mouth. You didn't say a loser. Why it didn't work for Biden and it didn't work for Harris.
yeah, I mean, let me say, look, if you care about democracy as a primary principal issue, you're already anti-Trump, pro-Democrat. The role of winning an election is A, what is dearer to the voters, not dearer to you,
Yep.
and B, what is an argument, if it's dear, that persuades them that you have more of their interests at heart.
Okay.
And look, I mean, and I don't want to get sidetracked, but I said this to Axel, I know we were talking about it. This was pretty evident to me. But there was a story the other day, and I think it was Bloomberg, I think that's where I read it, that 60%, and they could be right and wrong on the data, but it's not 10,
Yep.
60% of the consumer spend was coming out of the top 10% of the country. So 10% of the country was living large, and the other part was living in a recession.
Yes.
And what is dear to, and I always had this rule when I was a congressman, I had this rule when I was mayor. You be careful or you be very sensitive to the front door and the back door of the house. Okay? So what they care about is their paycheck doesn't get to the 31st of the month. their paycheck gets them to the 25th, and then they're scrambling. And
Yep.
take a look at the recent report by the CEO of Walmart. Consumers are buying less on the starting the 25th. As you get to the last week of the month,
Yeah.
they're not only buying less, they're buying kind of more cheaper versions. They're not buying steak, they're buying ground beef. There's all types of things that they look to me. That's a telling sign. So when you say to me, look, I care deeply about the foundations of democracy, but winning an election is about expressing what they care deeply about. And
That's.
I, and
I think that you.
and I and I and
Yeah. Go
I,
ahead.
and I'm not saying that democracy didn't matter, but you got schools, you got mortgages, you got kids living in basement, you got one healthcare away from the Chapter 11, you're taking money out of your 401k to make basic needs meet. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that the guys that's storming the Capitol on January 6th is not important, but you got like 20 other things stacked in front of it.
That's right.
It's like congestion at O'Hare during rush hour. Forget about it.
Right.
Uh,
Right. That's the thing. I think the most important thing you said there, and I think about this all the time, is it's not what you politician think is important, because you're never gonna
And
it's what do people, and by the way, what
and
do
Chris,
people who are persuadable think,
right? And
right?
Chris,
Like the Democratic base is the Democratic base for a reason. They vote for Democrats.
I'm going to say something. 2 points. One is I still think either she didn't have a primary, President Biden waited too long, et cetera. I think she could have won this race had she
I do
stayed.
too.
So okay, I do. And I
Yep.
don't think given that he didn't get 50%, et cetera, I don't think they wanted to vote for him. I don't think they wanted to reelect him, rather. And I think that kind of bifurcation, I'm using her debate as kind of the point in which there's a pivot away from this core economic. I hear you. I get it. This is what
Yep.
we're going to focus. Look, I'm a product of my experience. Bill Clinton in 1992 in the New York Convention, where he accepts the nomination. To those who work hard, play by the rules, raise your kids to know right from wrong.
Yeah.
That is I am your man. She walked away. She pivots somewhere else. She goes esoteric. And here's the thing. Now take this moment. This interview is Wednesday, the day after Wisconsin, Florida, right? Beyond, it's core very clear in Wisconsin. It's about Elon Musk, his money, etc. There were two people. Well, Democrats ran against Elon Musk, and Republicans ran with Trump. Both lost. Okay.
Yeah.
Second, the voters are extremely disappointed that he's all focused on Greenland and not on groceries. Nobody paid a single voted because he was going to go negotiate the price for Greenland. He made a pledge to lower the price of groceries, and he hasn't focused on it. And pointed, they gotten taken to the cleaners.
Yeah.
Here's the most impressive thing in this election that I don't think anybody's talking about. The election that just happened
Yeah.
yesterday. Okay, Wisconsin's a big deal. Florida's a big deal. Money's a big deal. One thing that's really struck me in the Getz district
Yep. Florida
is
won.
right. The Pensacola County, Escambia, I think is how
Yep.
you, I'm going to
Yeah.
butcher, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yep.
Trump wins it by 19. It's the first time at a federal election since 1960, that the Democrats won that county plus
She
three.
won it by 3. Yep.
But what's interesting about that county? It is 14% active duty and veterans, where the average nationally is 6. The military, active and retiree, just gave Donald Trump the one finger wave.
Yeah.
That is, to me, when you plow through everything, and there's a lot to plow through, and I'm not saying, oh,
Yeah.
I found something that nobody else found. Wisconsin, that's also her performance is not reduced to Madison and
No.
Milwaukee.
Nope.
It's a statewide victory.
I mean, when you win 55-45 in a state that basically produces winners statewide, like 1 to 2
50,
points, it's
yeah.
like winning by 40 in another
No,
state.
no. Look, in a 50-50 state, winning 55-45 is a big deal.
I mean, it's
Okay,
incredible. Right.
right. And it was not, Democrats did really well in 2 counties and bad everywhere else. It was a state. But to me, I think I'm saying it right, Escambia County.
Yeah. It has Pensacola in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Last time it went Democrat federal, as I understand, I got to go check my history. It's 1960. But the bigger point is Trump wins it by 19. The Democrat wins it by 3. It's a 22-point swing, and it's 14% active duty and veterans.
I
So
agree.
if I had told you on November 7th, 2024, our new base is going to be veterans, what do you think?
Yeah.
What would be the
Well,
over under that you would take
it
on that, Chris?
I totally, you know what's so fascinating about this moment, and I think people get daunted by it, but I mean, I totally with you, and it's like if on Barack Obama's inauguration day, January 2009, if you told me in 15 years, a Republican candidate, not say Donald Trump, will win young 18 to 29-year-old men, I'd be like, oh, it's impossible. I mean, like it will never happen. It is remarkable. Like we assume these coalitions are unbreakable and durable forever, and time again we're proved wrong. So it's like I know a lot of people probably roll their eyes and say, oh, of course, military is always going to be for Republicans. It's like, you mean how the white working class is always going to be for Democrats? I mean, I'm old enough to
No, I mean,
remember that was always going to be the case. Unions and I just watched. We were both watching this. I know the tariff announcement, emancipate. What a liberation day! He's got all these like blue collar guys out there as testimonials. I mean, it does speak to the fact that it is not a static country, and the two political parties are not
look, you
static.
have one. I really do believe the third point I made about both the financial crisis and the war, and then COVID coming, which still, as I said about COVID, it was not great for the body, and it's really disruptive to the body politic.
Yes,
Okay,
well
we're
said.
not done.
Yep.
Okay, so what I really believe is while we break things up along college, non-college, gender, race, etc., establishment versus everybody else, you have the first generation ever where they don't think their kids are going to do better than them, and
Yep.
that everything. So to me then speaks, and again it gets to what I said about her race is look, the American dream is unaffordable, it's inaccessible, and that is unacceptable to us as Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
It took us a generation to get into this problem. All you want is a shot at the American dream. All you want is your kids to have a shot, and Washington's given them the shaft. And I'm here to tell you that day's over. And I'm not saying here's my here's my 20-point housing plan. Here's my 20-point 401k plan.
No, that's Elizabeth Warren.
No, but look, those details are important. But what we lose sometimes is the sentiment.
Yeah.
And that gets to why did she go from down 9 to +3? It was the sentiment that I know what it means to take a utility bill, a healthcare bill, a mortgage payment, a savings for the 521 for your kids' college education, and I can't get gas.
Right.
This doesn't work.
Yep.
If I'm going to do this, forget Dairy Queen. We're gonna split the cone and we won't have any ice cream on it. I mean, it's this to me, and that, and you have this rage, and look, Chris, I have 3 kids. They're all grown. My kids are fine, but it can't be the American dream if only 10% of the children get a chance at it.
Yep.
It's not the American dream. 90% of you literally cannot get a home. You come out of college if you go to college with $30,000 average in debt. You literally can't afford the community college balancing with the child care payments. And you have people talking about bathroom access. What kids will play, what locker room they go to, and what sports. We're like, people are trying to figure out how to make their paycheck get all the way to the 31st of the month. And we're off talking about, we don't like the name on that school. We didn't like that founding father. Get him out of here. No. And the bathroom. What is this?
Can I
And,
ask?
we're not only talking about it, we come across like we're preoccupied with it.
Right. It's the only thing you're talking about, or the only thing you're focused on.
So I've got to say, when I listen, John and I talk all the time. We're weak and we're woke, and the American voters read us pretty well. Now, I happen to think the other side's vulnerability is they're corrupt and they betrayed you.
Yep.
Now, if you're going to run on our weaknesses, I'm going to start pointing out your weakness. And if you look at Wisconsin, and you look at the elections yesterday, voters are already seeing the Musk's piece, etc. Besides him, is the corruption, the money, and also the betrayal. I never asked you to talk about Canada and Greenland. I want
Gulf
my
of
groceries.
America. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
grandma's on the phone. She can't get her Social Security check.
Right.
Okay, and she's out in the cold, and Vance is up in Greenland in the cold. What is this?
Yeah.
And let me say this: as somebody been in two White House, etc. What's the over under that Canada becomes the 51st state at
Oh,
the end of 4 years?
I
Okay,
mean,
what's
well,
it?
two things. It's never going to happen, and if it did, it would be the greatest thing for the Democratic Party in history.
Well,
But no, there's a zero percent chance.
I'm only for it if there's 20 states out of Canada in the division. Okay.
You're getting about 175 electoral votes for
Yeah,
Democrats.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but the other thing is, what's the likelihood that Greenland's going to become the 56th state? Okay, okay, we're wasted. People can't get groceries. They can't afford. They're literally today. Another story I read. They can't afford. I mean, I knew this before in the sense of what health care, but it's in the sense of accessibility, but most importantly, the pricing. They're one healthcare sickness away for Chapter 11, and we're talking about Greenland, and they feel betrayed. They feel taken. They took them for a ride, and they also the family's off with crypto. They're off doing real estate, and they're making money. And it's all the Oval Office has become eBay.
I want to get to that. I want to ask one thing before that, mostly honestly,
Sure.
because I'm just interested in your take, which is there's now been 5, 6 polls that show Democrats are at their low ebb or damn close to their low ebb in terms
Yeah.
of brand approval. Uh, people. I always thought it was. I sort of dismissed this stupidly when Trump would say like "Comrade Kamala." I'd be like, I mean, she's not a communist, but people do. I heard that come up time and time again. Like people think California is basically 1960s Russia. What do you do? What do you
Let me just say,
do?
1960s Russia was the golden years of the
Yeah,
Soviet.
that's actually true. Those were the good Russia years.
those,
What
those,
what do
those,
you what do you make of that? Like, put on your political strategist hat and say, why are we where we are? Anzalone said something really interesting to me, and I took a note because I wanted to ask you about it too. He's like, the problem that we have right now is we're not even credible as critics
I know.
because so tell me what you make of those numbers that suggest the brand, my words, not yours,
Okay.
sucks.
First of all, I'm going to take two questions in inverse order.
Okay.
Right now, through 2025, gubernatorials in Virginia and New Jersey, and to 2026, this is about Trump. 2026 to 2028, this is about the American people. We have to be credible on that.
Okay.
And the idea that it's one thing, I don't,
Yeah.
you know, I don't want to replay that 2006, Chris, that you lived through with
Yep.
me when I was chair of the DCCC, was Nirvana or whatever. But we did have the house that Tom DeLay built about the corruption. Remember, we put the website, it was Bob Ney, Cunningham, etc., all
Yep.
the corruption. And then we had the 6 and 06, an affirmative. So I would say to you still that the work that while Trump is the focus, and he will be the focus because he makes himself and he is the president, they're in the majority, and we are the counterpuncher. Us attacking them on what they're doing on, grandma's stuck on the phone on Social Security. The fact that they're making, you have your first salmonella breakout. There's no FDA anywhere
Mm-hmm.
to be found. No,
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I'm not saying we have a thin reed of legitimacy. I don't think we don't have any legitimacy, and part of it is the counterpunching around where they have made and they own every piece of this mess.
Yes, they do.
Okay, now to the brand,
Yes.
you say California. Look, I get there to be. Everybody focuses on 92. Oh, it's the economy, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
The predicate on the economy being heard about Bill Clinton's critique of George Bush, and for that matter, it was 12 years George Bush, Ronald Reagan. He also had you had a predicate of a Walter Mondale, Michael Dukakis beforehand,
Yep.
and you had to be, and he was running as a different Democrat, and
Yep.
the cultural piece was a precursor to the economic. They both, and he had, we all now say Sister Soldier as kind of a shorthand, but he talked about welfare reform. He talked about putting 100,000 community police officers on the street as opposed to defunding the police, etc. And those were,
Abortion, safe, legal, and rare.
yeah, but those were necessary. Again, you're following in the footsteps of Michael Dukakis in '88, and in Walter Mondale in 1984, Jimmy Carter in 1980. But you're following those, and he picks a vice president that echoes, which was radical at that time rather than balance,
Yep.
reinforces the new Democrat motto, label, etc. And it was a permission slip. So the economic piece was essential, but so was the cultural relevance. And today, I'm sorry, from COVID forward, we we have been heard um, on a host of issues. Not, and again, it's okay to be, look. Our party is an accepting party, and that's where we are, and I'm proud of that. But we went from acceptance to advocacy
Mm-hmm.
on a set of issues that were not primary to the general public. They were primary to individuals. We'll always be an accepting party, but it became predominantly our brand. And if I'm not going to say this right, so I really just don't want. I don't want to hate mail. I don't want to be people to find my
I can't
children.
guarantee that.
Well, the truth is, if you go back 10, 15 years, when you think of marriage equality, you think of abortion, we actually won the cultural wars. We won them so successfully, we overshot the runway,
Yep.
and we stayed past. And then we took a series of issues from pronouns to locker rooms to bathrooms to names on school doors to a whole host of things that just wasn't core to where people were, and we lost them.
Yep.
And so when you say to me, what is the party? The party looks like the way it's seen and heard. And I'm sorry. And this is one of the things, somebody said, what did you learn when you were in Japan? I learned a ton in both about Japan, China, the Indo-Pacific. You know what else I also learned? A lot about America.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a ton about America being away from America, watching it. Also, being in touch with the men and women. Our largest military footprint anywhere in the world is in a single country is in Japan.
I didn't
And
know that. Interesting.
it's the only place in the world that America has a aircraft carrier permanently based.
Hmm.
You have 110,000 military, 58,000 active, Seventh Fleet based there. And my first month there, I'm working with the military, and they said, "Well, we noticed when you were mayor, you used to do citizens ceremonies every month in city council." And I said, "Yes." They said, "Well, would you come to the Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier to do a citizen?" I said, "The aircraft?" So I said, "Sure." Very early in my tenure, like 6 weeks in. And there we are in the bowels of the Ronald Reagan, the captain, etc. There's family. There's 17 individuals, 11 countries, 3 continents, all who had served the United States Armed Forces, and they weren't even citizens of the country, and they earned their citizenship. And they believed in this thing. They believed in our security. They believed, more importantly, in projecting our values and securing them. And here they were. They weren't citizens, but America grabbed them. And remember, the Ronald Reagan. There's 5,000 plus. It's a
Right.
it's a it's a it's
Bigger
a
than the
small
town I grew up in.
it's a municipality. It's a
Yeah.
small little town in the Midwest.
Yep.
And there it is. And you learn a lot about America being away. And you learn, and you also see this thing, and we're having debates about things that only a superpower can be off in this tangential area. And again, the name on a school, if it's a Civil War issue or a person, those are legitimate. But the fact that 2/3 of our kids can't read, and we're not focused on that. That to me, we have the lowest reading scores in 30 years, one of the worst math scores in 30 years, and we're arguing about bathrooms. Focus on the classroom.
So I want to let's talk about going forward.
Can
And
I
you've
do
talked
one thing?
about some of it, but yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
do one thing? Hold on. Go ahead.
I you've talked we've talked a little bit throughout this about sort of what the message needs to be going forward. But one thing that I'm fascinated by, and I read our mutual friend Jonathan Martin's piece on you, and one thing that jumped out at me, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I have it in my notes to bring up, but I feel like Democrats don't really talk about education anymore. I mean, look, I'm in Virginia where Glenn Youngkin is the governor of the state largely because a place in Loudoun County said like boys can use girls' bathrooms. I mean, like transgender boys could use that's basically why the guy wound up as governor. It was like the parents' rights movement in schools. Can you talk about education? Because I mean, look, when we were both 20 years younger, if I had to name the issues that Democrats were most closely identified with and had sort of like the public trusted them on, I probably would have put education or healthcare number one, but the other one would have been two.
No, no, no. Well, Democrat. If you go back to now, this tells you if you go back to Jimmy Carter and the creation of the Department of Education, and then Ronald Reagan's trying to end it, which he doesn't really try. Rhetorically, he tries, but he doesn't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through the trajectory. We basically have on average, a 23% public trust advantage over Republicans.
Yes.
We're now at dead even.
That is remarkable.
That is not a statistical error. Okay, when you lose 23 points, you don't have a statistical error. And so Democrats gave up because we stopped talking about and working on the classroom. Now, one of the things I wrote this piece you probably saw in the Washington Post.
I did, and I'll link to it. I'll link to it in my.
It's okay. But to me, the governor, Bill Clinton, not the president, but the governor, Bill Clinton, would be all over this because he would see the opportunity, politically profile. I don't take anything as a mayor talking about him, calling a national emergency meeting. This is like open running room, a mayor. And to me, and I try to point places where there has been successes. And I would just say this: Alabama and Mississippi, in Alabama on math, Mississippi on reading, they defy the historic demographic excuses. Oh, it can't happen. Not those kids. Not that zip code. Not that family background. Not that income. That's just not true. You got two places that out of 50 that you would not say are breaking the mold on reading and math excellence or progress rather.
Yes.
And so to me, politically, this would be a place, and we have to focus on the classroom. You have to talk about, and there's some lessons, more time on topic. B, when kids start to fall behind on either reading or math, early intervention, more one-on-one instruction. There are, and getting back even for the hour you're on reading or the hour and 15 minutes on math, getting back to the basics. And that's what Mississippi does in 2010 to where they were in 2022. They did basic phonics, more time, and early intervention. And the other thing, post COVID, is an example, we normalized absenteeism. National standard, any kid more than 7%, pick your number, whatever it is, get the
Yep.
academic around and pick the number. Anything past that, you're not going out, you're not advancing. You can't. It's against the law. It's against. That's it. You miss more than 7% of the year, you can't go to eighth grade. You got to go back and repeat seventh grade. And all of a sudden, you're going to get people stand up at attention. But I mean, to me, and there's the telephone issue, which I've been long for and advocate. But to me, the Democrats have to not be scared to go in and talk. Now, this, Chris. I'm 5'8". When I started the job as mayor, I was 6'2" once. Okay, but we had the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the country. We went through 8 years. We had created universal pre-K, never existed. Universal kindergarten never existed. Added an hour and 15 minutes every day. And at the end of the cycle, you got to be average. First city to make community college free. You got to be average. You get free books, transportation, and education, tuition. Okay. So to me, you've got to go in on real solutions that meet parents where they are. And again, these other issues, Donald Trump's DEI and closing the Department of Education, our bathroom, locker room, all distractions. And we have a crisis. And I'm coming from a country, and I'll tell you this story in Japan.
Hmm.
So I used to teach high school classes around the country, one a month. I'm in Saitama, which is a suburb of Tokyo, and uh, middle class, a little upper. And I asked for a show of how many kids are graduating high school. Now, remember, I'm from a city that went from 56 to 84, and I was doing the Irish jig for a Jewish kid. That's pretty big. And and they look around like they didn't understand it. I said, "Well, how many of you are graduating?" They look around. All the hands go up. All right, how many of you can pass math at your grade? They thought I would. They thought I was like from Mars. And hands up.
Hmm.
And we got to 50%. Stanford said what Chicago's doing is remarkable. They
Right.
had reading, math at the highest tier of international standards. They had universal graduation rates. We should just the where we are. We forced our kids into a lifetime of failure. What we did during COVID. You can't be a party of equity and believing in equity and be complacent about academic and educational mediocrity. Can't. They're not consistent.
So is that
And Democrats,
is your diagnose like
again,
how
my
did you
diagnosis
lose?
here.
Go ahead.
Here's what you say. Number one, and I wasn't mayor during COVID, so I want to say this, but as a party, we're sorry.
Hmm.
We made a mistake, and I'm here to apologize, and I'm here to work day in and day out to fix it, and I owe it to you. Here's what we're going to do at the school. Here's what we're going to do with reading. Here's what we're going to do with writing. Here's what we're going to do with arithmetic. These are the hours we're going to spend on it. We're going to have one-on-one. Here's how we're going to do it, and just be upfront. If we've tried everything else, just try the truth this time, which is we owe you an apologies. We should never have locked kids out of schools for 2 years. It's clear that because of the reading and math scores, we have a massive problem, and it's not going to fix it in a year. But we are going to work tirelessly until we get back to on the road to growth, on the word to reading and writing and math, academic achievement for all our kids. That's what we got to do.
I want to ask you one more message piece. The economy. You've talked a lot throughout here about it and how you talk about it. I mean, one of the problems I think Biden had was it was like he would say like the consumer price index looks good and nobody knows what the hell that is. You know what I mean? Like I always say like if you say the word GDP as a politician, anything other than a room of like economists or trade people, you should never do that. It was like my favorite Obama mistake. He didn't make that many, but I remember in like '07 he was in Iowa and he was like, "Can you believe the price of arugula at Whole Foods?"
I'll give you two mistakes Obama and Biden made on the economy.
Okay, go ahead. Because I'm interested in the message. Like,
Well,
what is it going
okay.
forward?
Okay, okay. One is don't listen to the experts listen to the experts when it comes to the analysis, not the language. Obama gets a briefing early on in his tenure, and I won't say from who, but it's a top person in the government on and from a with an economic degree,
Mm-hmm.
and he says there are green shoots. And if you go back to Obama, he says green shoots. No,
Yeah.
nobody.
Nobody talks like that.
Yeah, Biden, it's transitory.
What? I don't know that people know what that
Yeah,
means. Yeah.
yeah, transitory. Yeah, those were not inaccurate either one. Analytics, but not the language that comes from a person communicating to people that only 65% of the country doesn't have a college degree. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So you can listen to the analysis, don't listen to the language.
Yeah.
Number, my thing is, this is all I'm about. The American dream. You want your kids to have a shot at it, and what they've gotten out of Washington is the shaft. It's unaffordable. It's inaccessible. And to me, that is totally unacceptable.
Yep.
And my kids are going to be okay, but that's not how I keep score. Until your kids are okay, I'm not happy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we didn't get here yesterday. We got here for over 30 years, taking our eye off the ball, being happy because our kids were okay.
Yep.
They can, you know, you're tired of your kid coming home from college and living in the basement.
Yep.
And the reason they can't get an apartment is they can't afford it because they got to pay off the student loan. And you can't figure out how to go another month without your medication or cutting the pills in half because you're scared of going behind the eight ball as it relates to healthcare costs. And you're taking money out of your 401k that you use for savings and you know you shouldn't be doing it, but to pay today's bills.
Yep.
And it's about the middle class, it's about the American dream, and you just want a shot and you've gotten the shaft.
Which is fascinating because
And
I,
that to
I
me,
always thought Trump's message wouldn't work because Trump's message effectively, he talked about the American dream all the time. And he would say, the American dream is dead or the American dream is dying, and the only way to revive it is by voting for me. And I'd be like, people don't want that negative stuff. But then maybe it is to your point of like
but
meeting people where they are or how they feel.
Chris, don't lose sight of his I mean, it's all of a piece, which is I am the instrument of your rage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they want, right now, the establishment, they want a hammer and a jackhammer, and they want it drilled on the establishment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he tapped that revenge and that anger, and that gets back to what I talk about Iraq and the financial piece, which is nobody ever was held accountable. I'll never forget that debate we had in the Roosevelt room, because, and again, this is not to say but, and I think Obama, the president made the choice the president makes, which is, every day you lose not doing healthcare, you're going to lose. But I wanted the bankers, and the reason I wanted to do financial reform is the bankers would be on the other side of the table fighting you on healthcare. To get it done, you needed the healthcare industry on the same side of the table.
Right.
And post TARP and post the Recovery Act that was first passed, the country needed somebody upstairs that was accountable, responsible for what happened to them, held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like those whiny, sniveling little crap heads. Where's my bonus? Well, man, this person's lost their home. You don't get a bonus.
Do you believe I got two more quick ones and I'm gonna let you go. Is is
What?
the fundamental way to understand the way politics is working in this country right now less Democrat Republican, you've said some of this, less white black, less man woman, and that the fundamental dichotomy is establishment, anti-establishment? Is that how you see it?
I Yes, because I will, and I wasn't here. This is again I was in Japan, but the killing of the CEO of United Health
Mm-hmm.
and the reaction by the country to the killer, the cheering,
Yeah.
told me, I don't know if establishment or the elite versus the public at large is more significant than college, non-college, than all the other bifurcations we talked about,
Yeah.
but it doesn't get as much exploration as
Right.
college, non-college does,
Yep.
race does, gender does, geography does. And I'm not saying it's more important, but that's one of those things. When I was sitting here, I was uh, when I say I was sitting, I was in Tokyo and I was watching the reaction in America, and obviously talking to friends, but most importantly talking to my kids. That told me, again, when you think back of the arc of the last 20 years, the
Yep.
dynamics of our politics, that told me the elite versus the public was as much a dichotomy as all the other pieces that we split.
Yep.
Because I've never, you say you never, 20 years ago, you never would have thought that Democrats would lose on education, their political advantage. The idea that a person walking on the streets shot down in cold blood and people would be cheering the killer.
And not just a few people, and
I'm not talking.
particularly young people, right? I mean,
I,
that's the
I, so I just like that. I was
I
like,
totally agree. I was And I wasn't in
So the
Tokyo, and I was stunned. Yeah,
so to your core message, I don't think it supersedes the others, but I don't think it's being explored at the way we've explored college versus non-college and all the
yeah,
other kind of things that break out from it.
yep.
So I suppose if you said no, you have to pick, I would put it at the top alongside educational differentiation. But it's in a scheme of things that we should think about.
And I think it explains a lot about Trump's appeal. By the way, I think we
Yeah.
got too into Republicans vote for Trump, Democrats vote for whoever the Democratic nominee is, whereas a lot of regular people don't think like that.
No.
They don't see it. They don't see the world like that. Base partisans do. But they're, as you said earlier, they're already voting. The reason they're base partisans is because they vote for one side all the time. All right,
Yeah.
can we do 3 or 4 minutes on, we've talked a lot about message. I want to talk about messenger. What does it say to you, and I'm going to ask you about you, what does it say to you that Bernie Sanders and AOC go to Denver or Scottsdale and 20,000 people show up in March 2025?
It's look in the same way that it says what if you looked at that, you could see what was going to happen in Wisconsin, what was going to happen in Florida. There's a tale of two parties right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's what's going on in Washington among Democrats, and there's going on in the country among Democrats. And that's why in a battleground 50-50 state like Wisconsin, you get a 55-45.
Yeah,
That's a trounce. That's a whoop.
absolutely.
To quote George Bush, that's a whooping.
Correct.
So that's what it says. I mean, and I mean, there's other things. Would I label it the oligarchy when rich? But that's quibbling around the edges. I mean, I don't. I go to a parts of I'm in Chicago. There's working class neighborhoods. Not a lot of people at the diner are saying oligarchy. They're saying
Yeah.
rich,
Right.
powerful.
Right. And
So,
again,
but that's
I think
that's
the
it. That's
lesson.
on the marketing.
Yeah, the language side.
That's a marginal thing. It's not like But when you say to me, 25,000 people show up in Denver, I would say Wisconsin. I would say Pensacola.
Yeah.
That's what I would.
All right. I want to end on this. You are back stateside. You've had a lot of jobs. The 2028 race looks to me like it's going to be for the Democrats very wide open. Is that something that interests you?
Well, you've heard me say, I'm not done with public service. I'm hoping it's not done for me. Um, I will say to you, Chris, look, I know a lot of people want to spend their time, and not wrong, fighting Donald Trump because every day it's a battle. And he's trying to break something, create a new norm, a new regular. But to me, if I decide to do something electoral, I like when I ran for mayor, I wanted to fix the public schools. Sean Reardon at the end of my tenure from Stanford wrote, "The Chicago Public Schools is the best large city public schools." I got to have worked out in my head, in my heart, that I have something to say about the working middle class of this country and their children, a set of ideas and interests that I can contribute something that I don't think others could. So it's worth fighting Donald Trump, but my energy, my heart is being about fighting for the American people. And do I have something that others aren't talking about? And there's all the other, people up there that are being mentioned. One way or another, I have a personal relationship with them, and I'm
Of course.
very supportive. So I got to know that, you know, right now, I would say that, like you go back to 2020, and I'm always seeing that debate about, free healthcare at the border, and people raise their hand. I mean, so if I can stop the party from a Thelma and Louise moment driving over the cliff,
Incredible moment.
yeah, I mean, I look at that, and then, um, we don't even have universal health care here, and we're talking about free health care for if you cross the border. I was just like, hey, who, who does this? And so, but in the core, I haven't decided. I do love public service. I think it's something you can contribute to this great country, but I want to make sure I have something to add and to say to the core thing that I think not just um, to the dream, the American dream, that I think has really been coming under attack, and then also to the American family. That's something
Mhm.
that's really occupied. Now that I see my three kids all grown up,
Yep.
one is in the armed forces, another one is in a reservist, the other one is working on national security and where's the American family, the assault on the family? And I have things. If I think I can contribute, then I'll think about it in a serious way. But I'm not there yet. I'm back 3 months.
I know. It's only April 2025, and it just barely turned April. All right. I told your people I would let you
Yeah.
go by 4:20 Central. It is 4:20 Central. You are getting
No.
out of here, folks.
421.
Well, I mean, that's pretty close. 2,000 folks on this right now. I just want to say thank you all for joining us
Thank you.
live. If you
Yeah.
if you want, Ram, I will put a link to that Washington Post piece you wrote. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
All right, man.
All right,
Thank
His
you.
Excellency. Take care, my friend.
See you, brother.
All right, dude.